the hardest thing about being an entrepreneur, and especially in my experience, I've been in the business for only like more than 2 years, and the hardest
Fun.
one is managing people. I love what you said, fun, though it's not all fun, I would say. But I think that's the hardest challenge for me, managing the people. But not really being afraid of giving feedback, because that's me. I tend to have this one thing that it's hard for me to give you feedback. But one thing I've learned is once you set values, you can talk to your people using those values you've set. And that's a very big thing for me.
Welcome to Delegation Dialogues, the podcast where we dive into the world of business operations and explore the strategies that help companies thrive. Join your host, Regine Regencia, as she interviews business owners and professionals who share their insights on effective delegation, leadership, and growth. Let's get started.
All right, so welcome to another episode of Delegation Dialogue. I'm your host, Regine Regencia, and today we have a special guest who has been at the forefront of strategic advising for businesses across a wide array of industries. Joining us today is Taylor Villegas, the founder of
Yes.
12 Tables. So finally, I got it right. With a wealth of experience that spans startups in AI, fintech, social media, AG tech, and beauty to Fortune 2000 companies in sectors like insurance, real estate, finance, and contact. Taylor has been a trusted advisor to high achieving individuals for over a decade. Taylor, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
It's a pleasure, Regine. Yes, I actually got married officially last year and
Oh,
changed my name.
congratulations.
So I'm still kind of confused by it. My maiden name is Taylor Precourt, but now Taylor Villegas. Thank you for having me
Villegas.
on.
Congratulations, and I'm really
Thank
excited for
you.
you being one of our guests. There you go. And Taylor, you've worked with businesses of all sizes, across various industries. What are some of the most common challenges that business owners and key decision makers face when trying to grow and scale their companies?
Yeah, that's a really fun question, and it's one that my team and I often talk about. It really depends on, we call it stage aware. It really depends on what stage the company is in. So if you're in a really hyper growth stage, a small business that's looking to scale, you're potentially worried about expenses like payroll, right? Like that might be keeping you up at night because you have a lot of work coming in. Your productivity looks really great, but the reality is now you need to hire more people to fulfill that line of work. And so it's like that chicken, the egg, the cart before the horse. So I would say hiring is a big one in terms of kind of managing payroll expenses in comparison to just general revenue, diversifying revenue streams, so making sure they're not boxed into just one potential, revenue stream. Another one would be marketing. Like, how do we actually create a marketing strategy? How do we know we're spending in the right areas? How do we know we have the right strategic partners? Culture can be a big one. Hey, these four people really get it, want it, and have capacity. These other people, some they don't get it. Others, I love their personality, but their skill set's not a right fit. So, I mean, strategy is what we do. I mean, it really is our day in and day out. And so we see if there's an issue, we see it. And I probably could spend the entire podcast talking about random, business issues, but those would be the big ones. Like those are like the repeat offenders.
For sure. It's a lot of thing, and my question is a little general, I would say. But let's talk about delegation. Where does it comes in with regards to, business growth?
Oh gosh, I love talking about delegation. In fact, we just had a meeting with one of our staff whose teams is growing, and we were actually talking about how they have this natural, they get it. Like they understand delegation. Whereas some people really, it takes time in business to figure out what can I delegate because there has to be a really high trust as to who you're delegating to. right? So a lot of people keep all of these things either for the glory, right? And it's like their ego holding on to these items because they don't want to, feel like, well, you're not going to need me anymore if I give all these things away, versus looking at it as, well, I'm going to give some of these pieces away and I'm going to lead, manage, and hold accountable to the person I'm delegating to. And that way I have time to innovate or for additional critical thinking, or maybe I'm being trained into a managerial role. When I think about delegation, I always think like, what's your low-hanging fruit that you're avoiding the other stuff and you're handling these things first? Like, that's probably the items that are like master of the mundane material, and those really could go first. Like, those could be delegated out first. If we're talking executive management, when it comes to delegation, I think of like, what are the reports that you're looking at? Have you even established that? What's the cadence you're looking at? How do you know what everybody's capacity is? What's your sales funnel look like? What are your strategic partnerships look like? And we'll actually go ahead and create a delegation list of like 5 to 8 items and create a role for that executive or for that business owner, where they're now being gifted through this new hire, or whether it's like a virtual assistant, so that they actually have freed up capacity, because that's the true art of delegation, is meaning that you can do more.
For sure. That's why it's called the art of delegation, because there's a lot of things into it.
Yes.
And you just really got to have, I'd say, prepare a list for that. And you've mentioned low hanging fruit, so that can definitely start with that, which is really
Yes.
great. And we've talked about delegation, the hiring process, and the other issues with regards to scaling the business. And if these challenges aren't addressed effectively, I would say, what are the potential long-term consequences for these businesses, especially in highly competitive industries?
Yeah. So like, if they're not addressed, what happens?
Yeah.
So that's also an interesting question. A little value add that I want to add to that delegation piece is, I recently learned a method called keep it, combine it, or cancel it. And anybody that is managing a task list, I implore you to literally write it all down, like your functions. You can even do this with your business's issues, and genuinely look at like, what task am I doing and how much value is it adding? Because sometimes we just like to check a box and we don't realize that like that one thing that you think is adding all of this value, especially in corporations. Like, you might think like, well, I send my boss this really long email. Well, your boss might be looking at that email and thinking too long to read, where you spent all of this time and this precious energy. So really looking at it, and it's called keep it, combine it, or cancel it on the delegation side. That's a really, really helpful exercise. And then when it comes to consequences of the business, it really depends on the quality of output of work. If what you have going on, be it your staff, for example, if you have somebody in your staff that wants the role, they have the time to complete the role, but they do not get it, right? If you're an agency and the quality of work that they're putting out is going to make you lose business because the quality is not there, or that person wants the job, has the capacity, but you're in retail and they have an attitude issue, right? Like, they're not necessarily friendly Monday through Friday. They're friendly Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but Tuesday and Thursday you have customers that never want to come back in the store because the energy's off. I mean, it could be the biggest thing to something really small that's like an actual personality misfit. And that's going to cost you customers, which is costing you reputational value. It's costing you revenue at the end of the day. Another thing is, if you don't look at diversifying your revenue, then when things like COVID happen, God forbid, what are you going to do? Everybody was terrified, and I felt really, really blessed, because as a business strategist, people were calling me saying, how do I pivot? What do I do? Right? Like, I've never run a decentralized team. You've been in tech, decentralized teams. That's been a thing forever, right? Like, software has been developed outside of the US and Turkey and India and other parts of the world. So really, really knowing like, how can I actually add value in different ways and protect our revenue stream so we don't have too much focus in one pot. And then also culturally, like, if you have one person that's starting to have that bad taste in their mouth for whatever reason, and you have tried to mitigate it and you can't fix it, I mean, cancer is cancer, right? It really spreads fast, and that can be a poison in your business. So culture is something that I think is talked a lot about in a fluffy way, And it's not talked about in like a more tactical, how do I actually create that? And for anybody listening to this that's a business owner, you create that. That's the answer. You get to design what that looks like. So if you show up like a slob, then the rest of your staff is probably going to show up like a slob. If you show up put together, the rest of your staff is likely to be put together. If you're on time, they're on time. If you're organized, they're organized. So it really is like, it's almost like parenting, you know, the way you show up is in fact the culture that you're creating.
Right. That's why I think I've read a book somewhere that says before you hire people, you got to start creating the values first. Like
Yes.
the culture that you want. And that's one thing I think that, businesses are missing. Like they want to hire people, but they haven't really set the values first. So
Yep.
that's one thing that I've learned. And it's hard to deal
Yeah.
with people, like even the people that you know or you're friends with. If you're not in the same value, I don't think it's going to work in a work culture, things like that. That's one thing
I
that I've
agree. It's
learned.
similar to a marriage, you know, like if your values don't align, the marriage is going to suffer from that, right? You're going to have a lot of repeat fights. You're going to be
For
pretty
sure.
exhausted. So that's a really good point when it comes to hiring in terms of culture. If you don't have your values yet, I would implore you to sit down for a few hours. A lot of people think, yes, you can absolutely do offsites. I've done offsites with my team. I'm a huge, huge advocate for the EOS business model, which we have our staff on the agency side with Sunny Collabs. But you can take a couple of hours and think of, okay, is people being accountable important to me? Is integrity important to me? Is somebody caring about growth important to me? It doesn't have to be fancy values. That can be a later. It's called like, don't step over the good to get to the great. Just create something now. And that way your team, when there is feedback, and feedback is a caring thing, right? Like you don't give feedback for people you don't care about, right? You dismiss them. Like you give feedback to the people that you want to invest in and care about. So if you're giving feedback, don't you want to have values to say, hey, listen, that thing that you did really didn't align with our core values. Like I want you to be accountable. I want you to take ownership. I'm not here to punish you from it. I'm here to understand why the mistake happened in the first place and how I can help, right? Like that is the benefit of a core value. And there is a big, big price to pay for turnover. That's not discussed enough. Like if you're not doing the right type of hiring practices in the beginning, you are costing your own business money through your time value.
The hardest thing about being an entrepreneur, and especially in my experience, I've been in the business for only like more than 2 years, and the hardest
Fun.
one is managing people. I love what you said, fun, though it's not all fun, I would say. But I think that's the hardest challenge for me, managing the people. But not really being afraid of giving feedback, because that's me. I tend to have this one thing that it's hard for me to give you feedback. But one thing I've learned is once you set values, you can talk to your people using those values you've set, and that's a very big thing for me.
I
And
agree.
right. And going back to what you said, being in this business, I would say, can you share a success story where a business overcame significant challenges with your strategic guidance and went on to achieve remarkable growth or success?
Yeah, I feel really fortunate that I have to like think of like what's my funnest. You know, we've had a lot of success on the strategy side. So just for those that are new to, listening or hearing from me, I could be pretty quiet in the sense of I've got a big personality. I didn't mean it like that. I meant in the sense that in the very beginning of my entrepreneurial career, I cared so deeply about the validation that came from networking and people and awards, and not that all still has value. But I tend now that I'm very heads down. I have success in the silence, and I've really enjoyed that. And so for the better part of about 3 years, I've really kind of come into my own little rock in my world and created my businesses and my family in a more private setting. And so it's exciting to get to answer questions like this now because I haven't, had time or, made it a priority to get my voice out there. What we do is we run strategy sessions. They're 2 full hours. They're done either virtually or in person. It can be an enterprise business, that's a consumer product good, to a beauty brand or retailer, large construction development company, to early stage startup, or a startup that just got big funds, or, a startup that's getting ready to become mid-sized and they're starting to mature and have hyper growth. So we really advise on the spectrum. And what happens from that is we produce what's called a strategic blueprint. So we go through 12 different verticals of business that are really what you need for your brand, your business, and your day-to-day, from business development, branding, could be technology that you're building, or it could be something on the finance side or revenue stream. So we really uncover everything, and we give over this strategic blueprint. And then we stay on board with 12 tables, putting the right agencies and independents that are all masters of their domain into one table or one team to work for that project. So we call it central sourcing. And through that method, it has been really a fun ride. So we've had, people that are coming to us for funding, and we've seen checks being written. So they're getting funded because we helped them redoctor their deck, or try different innovative ways to get in front of vendors and VCs, or, we're putting them right into our, key people of influence, because we do also manage relationships with, VCs and angels in the disruptive tech space mainly. So that's been really exciting and really fulfilling to see, is a startup, with this big dream in their eye, and us we take that dream and we make it very literal, and we put together a plan, and they have to meet certain things first. But through that 3 to 6 month process, before you know it, they're pitching, and when they're getting funded, that's extremely rewarding. Other times, we have had retail companies recently that they had just purchased all this land in India to make these they smell so good. It's called Kriskara Naturals. It is the yummiest product that I've ever put on my skin, but they just bought all of this farmland to do Ayurvedic skincare line accessible in the US. Her origin story was so fun. So once I talked to her, I always have kind of that bi-directional discovery call. Is it going to be a good fit both ways? I loved her and the whole product and the origin story. So anyways, she came in for a strategy session, and it was clear that they had overspent by crazy dollars, in my opinion, on a website that was never going to serve them. It was never going to serve them. It was not an e-commerce focused website. Their packaging felt very rushed and didn't meet the actual botanicals and the formulations and the smells and the experience of the product. So we had to give her a strategic blueprint to say, hey, we're going to do this first. We're going to sell off these batches. Then we're going to go in for a rebrand design. While we do that, we're going to be in farmers markets. We're going to grassroots brand awareness. And so we built this entire otherwise, how do business owners that know this formula is the best for sunscreen for babies also supposed to know how they launch in a noisy marketplace, which is skincare? How would they know? So it's so gratifying. I literally feel like I'm in a philanthropic role. But yeah, between funding and just creating the strategic blueprints, it's been really, really exciting.
I really love you, saying the word fun, exciting, and that's already a testimony, you working with that client, the skincare brand. Because my next question is supposed to be asking you about a testimony of your clients, but I think that already speaks a lot. I would say.
And on the agency side too, and I don't want to confuse when I say agency. We have a collective of independents and agencies, which is 12 tables. And they are literally my peers at this point that also run powerhouse brand studios, or, content agencies, or, website developers. And we come together and do project work, and it is fun. So we call that central sourcing. But then I also am a partner with Sunny Collabs, and that's my content agency that's headquartered out of Tampa. And we add value because we save brands time and money on social content. And so we have photographers and videographers where we're working on projects like Carrabba's and Pinch a Penny pools and White Claw and 100 Coconuts and really, really fun, exciting companies. But we also are working with like Little John's Pizza and making sure that their social media matters too, and that they're getting to stay in their brick and mortar space for as many years as they possibly can run it through that popularity through social media. So I feel like on both sides, it just feels really rewarding because I do have a heart for small business and entrepreneurs.
That's why. That answers that. And, for listeners and for sure new listeners that we have who might be struggling with strategic decision making in their businesses, what should they know about the benefits of having a seasoned advisor like yourself?
Yeah. Well, we all are familiar, and if you're not, welcome to the club because you'll get familiar very fast, and it's called failing forward. Entrepreneurship takes grit, and a lot of what we know in our life, even personal, especially personal, is through failure. And it sounds like a cliche, but it's the truest thing that I could possibly say on the mic right now. And with an advisor, you are still going to need to fail forward, but you won't have to fail as much. So for example, if hey, I think I can afford to spend $10,000 in marketing this year for my business, that you're definitely a startup, you're probably getting ready to leave your corporate job, but how do you really make the most out of that 10,000? Well, that decision matters just as much to that person that has $10,000 budget and wants to leave the corporate world as it does somebody working at PepsiCo and having, $1 billion budget. The way that they maximize that matters. And if you work within a corporation or you're working within your business, let's say you're an entrepreneur of a tech app. Okay, you have a piece of tech, you're in the SaaS space. You are so in your own bubble because you have to be. You're not looking at, well, what are the best CRMs? What are the best phone systems? What are the best text messaging platforms? How do they all come together? What are the best practices? How do I build my team? How do I make sure I'm hiring the right people? What are the different revenue verticals? How can I diversify my revenue streams? How do I make sure that my finances are okay? How do I know when to hire? I could literally exhaust you right now. That is why you need an advisor. It's like a little genie in the box because your advisor, somebody like me, I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of companies. I am friends with the developers of many different types of softwares that you might not even know about. And I have partnerships with all the mainstream softwares. I have the technical knowledge. I have a Scrum background, right? So I do agile project management. So you get the benefit of the fact that I'm seeing behind the curtain of all of these companies. So by the time you come to me, I'm not just saying what's best for your company because I think, it's probably because I know.
Wow, all I can say, I was like, I'm going back to my own stories, especially one thing you mentioned is about the website earlier, which also happened to us, in all honesty. We had to change our website like 3 times, and that cost us so much just to get that website. And then not just on the website thing or the tools, the system, it's all about the hiring process and so on. That's why right now, if somebody's going to ask me, can I be an entrepreneur, or can I do this, or can I do that? One thing that I can tell them is go get an advisor.
Yeah.
Just like you said, fail will still be there. You're still going to fail and you're still going to experience a lot of things, but still you will at least, avoid a lot compared to not hiring an advisor. That's one thing that
it's funny too, because like if you work in the corporate environment, they're probably bringing in some kind of coach and whatnot, but there's like a meeting for a meeting to have a meeting about that meeting, and we still need a meeting about that thing. And so they have all of these meetings when the reality, it's like, what's the objective? There's this saying that says a problem half identified is a problem half solved. So if you really, really understand the issue, so like your issue is we want to own 10% more market share. Okay, well, that's not really an issue. That's a goal. What's the issue keeping you from there? Okay, well, that other company has more market share. Okay, but why? What are they doing that's different? Like, let's do cross analysis. So I'm there to really like kind of like poke the bear and like, I call it like a Russian nesting doll. Like you think it's this, but really we unlayer it and boop, there's the issue. And once we know the issue, now we can develop a plan to solve it.
Awesome. And that's very valuable, I would say. So finally, Taylor, for entrepreneurs like me, not just startup, I would say, because, even those that are growing and really wanted to scale, your service is always it's a must, I would say. So for entrepreneurs and business leaders who are hesitant, I was that person before, about seeking outside advice, what would you say to encourage them to take that step?
I think that if you're really serious and you already believe in yourself and what it is that you're doing, then to not have an advisor is a complete disservice to when you can get there. And I'll give more context. For example, for me, it's really a matter of like an advisor is going to help you get to where you want to go quickly and more cleanly. And when I say advisor, I'm not talking about a coach. Yes, people should be championing you. That is not what I'm here to do solely. I'm really looking at hey, why are we spending this versus that? Hey, are you looking at your profit margin? Hey, are you contracting employees? Okay, well, do you know your percentage of contracted employees versus revenue? And people are like, huh? And it's like, okay, well, that's a metric that's going to grow with your revenue. And we need to make sure we need to put it in a box. So we're there to have your back, but against all of these tools that as a business owner, you've likely never, you're like, why should you become a finance expert? Why should you have to become a, integration expert? You shouldn't. So that's the benefit of an advisor. And the last thing I would say too is there are a ton of awesome marketing agencies across the country and business agencies. However, I am not a believer in a one size fits all when it comes to agency work. An advisor, they should be a generalist, right? I should be, by nature, if I'm doing my job right, I should know a lot of things, right? A lot about a lot of things. When it comes to hiring a web designer, for example, or somebody that's going to create a brand, or somebody that's going to do your media buying, you want the expert. You want people that are obsessed with that field. It's their realm. They're not worried about anything else. You want to stay clear in most industries of the one size fits all marketing agency because they are naturally distracted. So if you want really, really great success, that's really why I created 12 Tables, and that's why I became a partner with Sunny Collabs, because those were two pieces in my strategic career that the execution was only as good as those completing it.
Right. I feel like I'm getting a free consultation as of the moment. So
oh, that's good.
thank you so much for your insights. And I'd love to hear more. So I'm going to do some rapid questioning to you, Taylor, before we end.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm curious. For sure, you've heard a lot of advices, but what's the best piece of leadership advice you've ever received?
Oh my God, it's rapid questioning too. The best advice. It's so funny because I'm an advisor, so it's going to sound like a conundrum, but I think the best advice was, if you want the wrong advice, ask somebody else. And that means that you have to listen to your gut. In business, like your gut is really smarter than your head.
Wow, that's interesting. And if you could give one piece of advice, if this is different from the one that you just mentioned, one piece of advice to a new executive, what would it be?
Yeah. I would say this goes for enterprise to entrepreneur. Whatever that thing is that you're doing, if you don't believe it, nobody else will. So if you don't believe that it's truly the best canned water in the universe, then nobody else is going to believe it. If you don't believe it's the best car service, autonomous app, nobody else will. So I know it sounds cheesy, but I work with people that they believe it. And so I'm forced to, because they believe it so undoubtedly.
I love that. You should be the first believer of whatever it is you're offering. How has your experience advising across diverse industries shaped your approach to business strategy?
Oh, I love that. So It's actually made me so much more fluid in my approach to strategy. When I first started, I had like a PowerPoint presentation. It was like, I'm Taylor Precourt, and this is why you should trust me for the next 2 hours. And it was very like regimented. And now for strategy sessions, they need to send me any literature they have on the business 48 hours ahead of time. And they can or can't bring their laptop. I record the meeting. I have a transcriptionist with us, and there needs to be a whiteboard, and they need to be willing to tell me anything that I ask and understand that I'm not afraid to hurt their feelings. If we are on the same page, it goes incredibly, because every business is different. Every owner has a different struggle. So I've learned to just be more fluid. Like, strategy should never be boxed in. Framework, yes, all for framework. But a predetermined one-size-fits-all strategy, there's no such thing.
Wow. That's an awesome take on that. I mean, we're always making changes with strategies, but I haven't really heard that one. Another question, what's one mistake you see businesses make often, and how can they avoid it?
Well, I'm not going to say something technical or skill set, although I do see that a lot. So I have to answer it's two things. One is, just because you're the owner doesn't make you the CEO. Know when your skill sets are lacking and hire accordingly, or hire an advisor to help you figure that out, because you should enjoy your job. And if you are a creative person and you're stuck doing business administration, good luck. You're going to hate what's going on. But the biggest issue that I see is that entrepreneurs and small business owners and executives, this is all of you guys, this is literally everybody. Okay? Are you ready?
Okay.
They don't enjoy the journey. They have this metric of where they want to get. And so they're just hustling. I'm just hustling. Oh, these are my working years. This is this. And they're not existing in the space and enjoying themselves. And there's different ways that people receive. And we talk a lot about like self-care, mental health. Yes, I'm somewhat talking about that, but I'm really talking about like hustle culture. To me, is gross. It should not be praised. It should not be praised. It is a season. There are seasons that I have to hustle. Sometimes I have to let my husband know, hey, it's going to be a really crazy month. I've got this thing going on, but it's because I don't want to hustle for the next 6 months, right? Showing up to work does not mean hustle mode. Hustle mode is when you can never turn it off. You're never satisfied. It's like you get that. And I used to be that person. I was an EA, and then I was a project coordinator within like 3 months of my corporate job. Then I was a project manager. Then I was a release manager. I mean, I was just climbing the ladder. And with every climb, I was excited for like one day. And then I was looking at like, okay, how can I become the CEO? Like once I was a director, I was already over it. I never just like existed in the space. And entrepreneurs have a natural tenacity. If you're a really good entrepreneur, you've got a lot of drive. But it's okay to really just enjoy the journey, because I promise you, like retirement, you're tired, right? There's the word tired's in retired. So stop acting like, well, I'm going to get there. And when I get there, then I'm going to be happier. When I get there, then I'll take my wife out to dinner. Or when I get there, it's like, do it now.
Aw. That's very true. I always say that, being entrepreneur is not for a faint of heart person, things like that. That's because of the pain and so on, and literally crying over the process. But we're forgetting that one thing, and you just said it. Enjoy it. Enjoy the journey.
Yeah, enjoy it. And if you don't, that's okay. You just have to recognize it. It kind of reminds me of like, there's a staffing term that says you hire slow and you fire fast, right? If you have a really good hiring process and somehow they still make it on the team and things aren't working out, like do them and yourself a favor. The same goes in your own career. Like you should think about something. Am I going to drive into entrepreneur slowly, right? That's great. That's that slow hire. But am I going to fire myself fast? And I don't mean because like, oh, this isn't working, I'm going to give up. You do need grit and resiliency, but like, again, that's the gut thing, right? Like if you want the wrong advice, ask somebody else. Just ask your gut. Your gut's right.
It's really is interesting. I think we're good with the rapid fire. Just one more question before I let you go.
Yeah.
What's the most rewarding part, I would say, as your role as a strategic advisor?
I think that when you're saving people, I feel like this is what I would answer with that. I'm just going to say the first thing I thought of, and then I was trying to change my words because we're humans and we like to be perfect. I was going to say that I really reduce entrepreneurial and executive anxiety. That would be my biggest, I think, takeaway, because they have somebody else to be a soundboard. And when they're really foggy about something, like I'm helping draw clarity, or when they feel like something's not going to work, I'll figure out a way to make it work. And I just really love that. My husband runs an AC company called Air Mavericks in the greater Tampa Bay area. And obviously, yes, it's my husband, and we actually have a shared office space. Thus, if you're watching this, I'm looking to my left right now. He's not there. But when he's having a really, really crazy day as an entrepreneur, and I happen to be in our office because it's not very often, I have a little whiteboard back there, and I will clear the whiteboard and I will issue list it, like, what's going on in your head right now. He just brain dumps to me, and I'm like, okay. And I'll ask him, like, are you asking for advice? Because that's also important in a marriage, by the way, and friendship.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes people are just talking to talk. You need to clarify. Are they asking for advice? So I'll ask him, are you asking for advice? And he says yes. And so I'll just whiteboard his issues and say, like, this one can wait. Like, it's called LTV. This is a long-term issue. Doesn't have to be addressed right now. What are the short-term issues? And then we'll prioritize it by the amount of impact, right? And we'll go from there. And within 30 minutes, like, I can see my husband's shoulders relax, and I get to live and experience that every day, whether it's through my staff and saying, like, hey, how can I help? I see you over there. You're heavy breathing. That's kinesics, right? That's body language. It's the art of body language. Like, what can we do? So I would say the most gratifying thing is really kind of reducing that anxiety that can just come with overwhelming responsibility of entrepreneurship.
Aw. And I know I said that that's my last question, but I'm curious because I've recently been, reading books all about business. What's your
Yeah.
favorite book?
Oh, I guess it would just depend on, like, what's being learned. I read a book, if it's about hustling or anything to do with, like, the speed of our current day, there is a book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and it's really provocative and interesting. I read that by the pool a few months ago. It was a really good read. Freakonomics, if you've never read it, is just a fun read. It kind of shows you how, like, nothing is what you think it is in terms of face value. And I've always really enjoyed the micro and macroeconomics just reads, but Freakonomics is a great one. Outliers was the first book that I identified with as an entrepreneur. I realized, like, oh my God, they're talking about me, which they're really just talking about anybody that has the guts and the courage to be different. And kind of looking at my library right now, if there's
Aw.
something, I would say those are the big ones. For any business owner that's listening to this, though, that you have, a team that's growing, over 10 people, the EOS business model, in my opinion, may be one of the strongest business models that I've ever had the pleasure and privilege of, learning in a classroom setting. If there's a framework, I've probably read about it, wrote about it, talked about it, experienced it, workshopped it, and it's been so incredibly impactful for Sunny Collabs. Our eyes are open, and there's nothing that can stop our business from growing and our clients from being happy with our work because of this particular business model and the way that we operate on the back end. So it's a shameless plug. I don't even get paid for that. I just had to say that. It's
For
so
sure.
good. I had to share.
Awesome. And yeah, Taylor, I really love your energy. That's one thing that I can tell you. I love your words.
Yeah.
Fun, exciting. Every word is like positive thing on my ear. And
Thank
yeah,
you.
thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your valuable insights. Your experience and expertise in guiding businesses across various industries are truly inspiring. And I'm sure our listeners have gained a lot from your perspective because myself. I've learned a lot. So to our audience, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Delegation Dialogue. If you found this conversation insightful, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with others who could benefit from Taylor's wisdom. Remember, strategic thinking and informed decision making are key to long-term success. Until next time, I'm Regine Rehencia. Keep striving for excellence, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Thanks for tuning in to Delegation Dialogues. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and gained valuable insights into optimizing your business operations. If you are looking for expert virtual staffing solutions to support your business, visit Strategic Assistant Staffing at strategic-assistant.com. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. See you next time.